Welcome sa atong discussion for Chapter 1, Nature of Human Rights. So, when we say human rights, unsa din ang definition sa human rights? Now, in defining human rights, Jose Zalaquet, a lawyer, he said that human rights are systems of values or elements that are inherent to human dignity. Pasabot, these are kanang human rights are kanang importante para ma-uphold na to ang ato ang dignidad as a person. And if we try to understand it even clearly, ang human rights is ma-define gid nato as the sum or collection of all privileges, claims, benefits, entitlements, and it also include moral guarantees that are given to a person just because that he or she is a person or he or she is human. So mao na siya ang gigikanan sa human rights. The mere fact that we are people or we are human, naatay human rights. So ingon pa ni Jacques Maritain, isa ka philosopher, he said that humans possess these so-called rights on the very fact that they are not a means to something, dili sila ang kanang pamaagi sa isa ka butang, kung dili, they are an end already. Sila na ang bali end point. Dili sila gamit, 'di ba? Tawo man ta. So we are not things that should be used. However, we are humans and must be treated with high respect and honor our human dignity as well. So we must be treated as people. So mo na siya nga naatay human rights. Even Pope John the 23rd, he stressed and showed us that naay connection ang tawo ug ang pag-possess niya sa iyang rights, meaning the person and the person's possession of rights. According to him, human beings are people endowed with intelligence and will. So, ang tao kuno is we are born with intelligence and freedom. And therefore, because of that, we ultimately will have rights. For example, in Article 5 of the 1987 Constitution, when this was promulgated, the freedom to vote, the freedom to do whatever we want, the freedom to eat, the freedom to speak one's mind are all given to us. But Article 5, but of course, there are other factors that surrounds human rights. Human rights are those entitlement through how the state power is used and its limits to protect its citizens, meaning more than the inherent or kanang naanadaan sa tua, there are also rights that are given and privilege siya. Dili siya inherent, dili siya daan sa atua. For example, kanang the right to vote. Yes, it is a right, but it is also a privilege because kinahanglan imo sang ang mga requisites to become a voter, imo sa pod siyang dapat ma-fulfill. For example, dapat 18 years old, dapat resident ka sa place kung aha ka mag-vote. So it is a right, but it is also a privilege as well. And in the words of Jose Jokno, no, there is no other cause more worthy than the cause of human rights. So let's go now to the kinds of human rights. So what are the kinds of human rights? According to the book by that according to your reading material, Okay, according to Karel Vasak, there are actually three generations or kinds of human rights. When we say generations, of course, we have the first generation, second generation, and the third generation. So, the first generation human rights is what we call the civil and political rights, or this is also known as the liberty rights. When we say liberty rights, these are the rights to life, to liberty or our freedom, and of course, security. Security of a person. So, dapat dili ta sana dili ta i-kidnap or dili ta i-hold against dili ta, kuan o right to be free ba. Muna siya ang liberty rights. The second generation human rights is all what we call the economic, social, and cultural rights. This is in response to how about our rights to education, to work. How about the right to rest? And these are rights. The rights to rest and to relax, di ba? And most relevant good na right during this time of pandemic is our right to health. These rights are all under economic, social, and cultural rights. Remember, class, that our health is a human right. It's not a privilege. This is not given by any form of entity or the government. Because you are a person, you ultimately have this human right, na kay right to live and be healthy. And the third generation is the solidarity rights, or the third generation human rights. This is in response to when people realized na naa ay need for a more globally global cooperation between nations that based on international solidarity. So these are, for example, the rights to peace, peace to the rights to development, human rights, even children rights are all included in solidarity rights. So these rights are all enjoyed internationally. Okay? Even the rights to humanitarian disaster relief, kanang mga pag naay masalanta na place and then tagaan og relief, that's also our right. Um, all covered under solidarity rights or third generation rights. Now, aside from kinds of human rights, there are principles behind the concept of human rights. And what are these? The first principle is the universality of human rights. When we say universality, from the word universal, it means rights must be for everyone. So that's very easy to understand. When we say universal or universality principle of human rights, it only means that it must be enjoyed by everyone, and everyone must benefit from it. So walay pili, tanan ang mahatagan og human rights. There must be no distinction of any kind. So dapat dili mamili og race or imong color, gender, even your language. Kay kung moing kag universality principle of human rights, this means that internationally recognized imong right as a person, and it should be observed without any kanang differences kung aha kagikan or unsa imong nationality. Okay, so that only means that by virtue of being a person or being human, no one or no group, or and certainly no place should be denied their basic human rights and even the enjoyment of these rights. The second and third principle of human rights, called indivisibility and interdependence, are actually related. These two will always go together. And when we say indivisibility and interdependence, this is what the indivisibility and interdependence are actually our first generation and second generation human rights. And our um, first generation and second generation rights must be equal and related. So that's what it means. So aside from principles, there are also what we call characteristics of human rights. So what are these? So when we say characteristics of human rights, this should be inherent, inalienable, and universal. So you already know what is universal. It means human rights is for everyone, or everyone is entitled to his or her human right. Now when we say inherent, ang pasabot sa inherent is naanadaan sa ato, rights already possessed by the person since birth. Mao na siya ang pasabot sa inherent. Now when we say inalienable, what that means is that no one can take away your natural human rights. Okay? No one can take away your rights. But there are actually exceptions to that rule. Say, for example, if person A has the rights to express himself through singing, sige siya kanta, imong silingan, sige kanta, pero kung nakadisturbo na pud na siya nga person or nakadisturbo na pud siya sa inyong neighborhood, katungod pud sa mga silingan adtong tawo nga nagsaba-saba nga isumbong siya kay katungod man pud sa mga silingan nga kanang dili sila madisturbo sa ilang pagpangatulog or sa ilang pagpanimalay. So naatay mga rights nga pwede makuha sa atoha kung giabusaran na nato. And then lastly, the components or what comprises human rights. When we say components, there are actually 4 components of human rights. The first one is the subject or the right holder. So kinsa maning subject or right holder? Yes, you are correct. Kita na siya. We are the person who bears the right. And of course, kung walay right holder, wala human rights. So dapat naagi person or subject to or right holder. The second component is the duty holder. When we say duty holder, this is an entity, usually the state or the government, nga mag-ensure nga ang atong rights kay wala na violate. So of course, ang government na siya. Okay? Kay kita daan as subject or right holder, kabalo naman ta sa atong rights. Ang trabaho ni duty holder or ni government is to ensure and to secure nga dili ma-violate ang atong human rights. Now, the third component is of course the object or kung unsa nga right ang atong gusto. Daghan kayo og klase-klase nga human rights. We will talk about that in the next coming discussions. So for example, freedom of speech, mauna siya ang object sa atong human right, the freedom to speak and to say whatever we want, diba? Of course, without violating other people's freedom as well and rights. And lastly is of course implementation of those so-called human rights. Kinahanglan ma-implement gid na siya. Kay kung dili na siya ma-implement, wala na siya purpose. So, mao na siya. Dapat kaning upat ka components sa human rights is mag-uban gid ni silang upat. Naa gid ni sila tanan. Okay, so I think class 2, put it simply, ang human rights is for everyone, walay gipili, no? And kinahanglan ang government pangalagaan gid na niya ang right sa kada tawo. Okay, nga iyahang okay, the government has the obligation to its citizens nga dili gyud dapat ma-violate ang ilahang human rights. Okay. And dapat na strict implementation ana. And dapat na ay rules na dapat balaod to ensure non-violation of human rights. Class, ang human rights walay gipili, babae, lalaki. Okay. Bisag unsa pa na ang imuhang gipili nga gender, bata, tigulang, unsa pa na imong color, unsa pa na imong inistoryahan, ang human rights wala gipili. As long as you are a person, you have human rights. Even mga piniriso class, naana sila human rights. Okay, we will talk about that more. Naalan jud ko last nga gusto na ko nga inyong una-hunaon. You are BS Criminology students. Therefore, you know or you are studying also penal laws, meaning ka ng mga preventive laws, nasa mga criminal laws. Take time also to um, kanang understand the situation or the circumstances of not just the victims, but also those who are what we call kanang mga nakasala, mga piniriso, nakasala sa balaod, mga piniriso. Class, if you look at the situation sa mga prisuhan sa tibuok Pilipinas, pipila lang ang prisuhan nga hayahay. Kung nakita ninyo ang atuang mga penal places, luig gid ilang kahimtang. They are already stripped of their rights to be free kay nakasala sila, and yet inhuman gihapon ang treatment sa ila sa sulod sa prisuhan. I'd like for you guys to take a look at that. Kay even kaning war on drugs, I have nothing against the implementation because it's our right as citizens also to be secure sa atong panimalay nga dili ta masudlan og mga dautan nga elemento tungod sa droga. But class, as long as you're a person, imong katungod na mabuhi. So I don't know if unsa ang inyuhang sentiments about that. You can message me and we can talk about it more on a more detailed discussion. So that ends our discussion for this topic. Thank you, and I will see you on our next discussion. Thank you. Bye.